as the church starts to grow, I have to face some pain, and that pain is, am I willing to take things off the plate, even if I like them or even love them, because those are not the things that the organization needs from me now. I look at people in our organization and I realize some of them have taken things off the plate that they love dearly. Maybe a particular ministry like college ministry or something age-based. Maybe the oversight of somebody, of some other ministries that they really enjoy looking over. They've had to decide as the church grows, what's the best thing here? Is the best thing for me just to keep in my lane all the things that I love? Or is the best thing for us, as an organization, for me to do what is most impactful? I've heard leadership described that way. Leadership is doing the thing that needs to be done. It's figuring out what it is that's going to move the needle, and it's doing that. I'm not saying you don't stay in your passions and in your wheelhouse, but if you're like me in ministry, there's a lot of more things I love about ministry. There's a lot more passions that I have that I'm able to, execute on. And so I've got to figure out what are those things that are the most important. There is pain in trying to narrow. There is pain in giving away things that you really love.
This is Breaking Barriers, where we help pastors and churches grow so that they can go.
All right. Hey, guys. Welcome to the Breaking Barriers podcast. My name is Pastor Andrew Hopper, and man, we're excited to have you back on the podcast today. Today, I'm going to talk about an important topic around growth and pain. So I think many of us understand this. There's a very popular book called Leadership Pain that came out years ago, and I think the concept of that book really nails something on the head, and that is that in any leadership role that we have in life, it is going to attract painful moments. And many times our capacity as a leader pretty much stops when our capacity for taking on more leadership pain stops. In other words, at some point in our life as leaders, we're going to come up against things where we just have to make the decision, am I going to take the pain that comes from walking through this doorway here that on the other side leads to growth, a healthier organization, eventually multiplication, but am I going to be willing to walk through the pain that gets me there? One of the things I've heard Pastor Larry Osborne say that I thought was so good, and it kind of helped me kind of get on this journey of thinking about leadership pain in this way, is that we can have growth or we can have comfort, but we cannot have both. Things can either be calm or they can grow. They can be stable or they can grow. They can be tranquil or they can grow. You're not ever going to have tranquility and growth at the same time. Those two things will not coincide. Man, this is just sort of a general principle in life too. When you think about growth, always coming on the other side of pain. I mean, when our body aches from lifting and working out, that is when we are growing. You think about agriculture, like, plants and farm and sustain, that kind of stuff comes on the other side of soil being broken up. I've thought about this often with my kids. My kids are younger, and when they were younger and as they're growing, it's so funny. We actually have, we literally call it growing pains when kids are growing. It's like, man, we know for them to get to where that God-ordained maturity is in their life, there is going to be pain, even physical pain along the way. I think this really matters for us today because this podcast is all for church growth, multiplication through church planting, and helping pastors grow so that they can get there. And we've just got to confront the reality. If our goal is to be comfortable, then we will not grow. We certainly will not grow to the point of being able to go. If our goal is to be comfortable, there will be decisions that we will not make because those things are going to be painful. Not everybody's going to like it. It's going to end up bringing on criticism. It's going to mean more stress, and we're not going to make those decisions if comfort is the main thing. But if we want to grow so that we can go, then there are specific pains that we are going to walk through. And it really doesn't matter what size our churches are in terms of this regard. I think there is this big fallacy that once our church grows, and once we have X amount of people or once we have X amount of budget, that all of a sudden we're going to be in a place where there's no more leadership pain and we're going to kind of have it on easy street. And I can tell you from personal example, if you have a real growth and growing and going mentality, the problems only get bigger. The problems only become more complex. they can end up feeling like they weigh more. I mean, in every stage, whatever we're facing, the pinch point of pain to get to the next level, to see the next breakthrough, it's always a decision that we're going to have to make, whether we're going to walk through it or not. Whether you're a church of 200, you want to grow by 20%, it's like, man, it's 40 people. But to get from where you are to there, or maybe you're a church of 500 and you've never planted a church, but you want to become a multiplying church. To get from where you are to there's going to be pain along the way, and we have to decide whether we think that the outcome of that growing and going is worth it. Chaos, stress, pain, that is the price. And when we stop paying the price, we will inevitably plateau. I want to tell you 6 points of pain that I have noticed and have really walked through. And I think they are indicative pretty much of any growing organization, especially growing churches. And so that's what we're going to do today on the podcast. 6 pain points that I think every growing church and every growing leader is going to walk through. I think it's very important that we see this stuff on the front end for primarily 2 reasons, okay? The first reason is my hope is that when I go through these, there's going to be guys that are listening to this that think to themselves, man, I'm not alone. That feels to me like it's something that I'm walking through. And what I want to tell you is, every leader that's got a growing church that is trying to figure out multiplication and continue to kind of grease the wheels of growth, you're not alone in these pinch points of pain. They're very common. I see it not only in myself, but I've seen it in a lot of others as well. Of course, the second thing is I just think in any fight, knowing that you're about to get hit is an advantage. I think it's when you don't see it coming that you can end up getting kind of leveled by it. I'll never forget the first time I ran down on a kickoff in high school, in a college in a football game. Beat everybody down there, broke down to make a tackle, and a guy from absolutely out of nowhere came and hit me right in the ear hole as hard as he could, which is illegal now, okay, probably going to save some lives. But there was no rules around that stuff back then, and it was horrible. I mean, just bell rung, parts of the helmet flying off. I mean, it was just kind of crazy. It's the hits that you don't see coming like that that can really lay you out. In my opinion, if we know that the enemy is going to come after us and there are pain points that are very common among growing churches, then why don't we call them out so that we can see them a little ways off and also make sure that we don't feel alone in them, all right? Whether your church is 100, 200, 500, 1,000, 5,000, I think that these are going to resonate if you are part of a church that is attempting to grow so that it can go, all right? 6 pain points in order. The first one is this. I want to talk about the pain of reorganization. Anytime a church grows, I heard Michael Fletcher from Manna Church say this one time at a dinner I was at with him. And he said, man, anytime a church grows by 20, 25%, it needs to reorganize. Now that doesn't sound that crazy, right? Because if a church is larger, growing by 20, 25% may happen every 2 or 3 years by the time you do all the math. It's harder in a small church though, because when you think about 100 people in the church and then you have 3 new families join, you just grew by 25 people total, and it's time for a reorganization, all right? And so early on when our church plant was just growing, I felt like we were in this mode of having to reorganize all the time. Some of us right now might be hearing this, and you're like, man, our church has grown by 100 people in the last year, and we were 200 or 300 people. We've grown by 100, and you're facing all types of problems right now, and some of it might be because, man, you've grown and you have not reorganized. All right, 20, 25% growth, we're going to need to reorganize. And here's what happens, and this is why that is painful. When you begin to reorganize, there are people who are in seats on the bus where their seats are going to need to move. And I don't just mean on staff. I'm not just talking about big church, huge staff stuff here. I'm talking about volunteer teams as well. All right, high-level leaders as well. There are people who are going to need to move their seat, or there might even be people who are going to need to get off the bus. And in either of those cases, if they don't see it, it's going to be very, very difficult. It's just going to be hard, man. It's going to be one of those things where you're making a decision as a leader that is the best thing for the church. It's the best thing for the group. And ultimately, I would say it's even the best thing for the person, the volunteer, the staff person who maybe the church growing has sort of outgrown them, or it's time for a different seat. Ultimately, I think it's going to be the best thing for them too, to be in a place where they can thrive. But they're probably not going to see it that way. They're going to see it potentially in a negative way. And that is just hard, man. You can end up loving people like crazy. You're trying to do the right thing for everybody, but it just hurts people when things reorganize. And you end up becoming a villain. You end up becoming a bad guy. And, you end up being misunderstood sometimes, or you end up having to make a decision that negatively affects someone. At least that's the way that they see it. And it's just very hard. That's part of the pain of reorganization. The other part of the pain of reorganization is that people don't see that the organization is changing, and therefore, when their relationship to the highest level leaders or some of the highest level decisions begins to change, they feel like they're losing something. So the classic example of this is the idea of a church moving from, small group. It's a small group. It's a small church. It's kind of like golfing buddies, everybody knows everything, and all decisions are made kind of collectively. And, but as a church begins to grow, it kind of moves more into more of like a basketball team where, there's more people on the floor. There are some people that are specializing, but hey, we're all on the floor together. We're all sort of, rowing in the same direction on both offense and defense. We all know what everybody else is doing. We all understand where the organization is going and all the decisions that are being made. And so it's different than golfing buddies. It's a little bit different, but it's still, people are in the know and there isn't this high specialization. But then one day the church moves into football team. And that means that, hey, we've grown to the place where, the offense and defense might not even know what the other team is doing, what the other side of the ball is doing. Like I said, I had a chance to play football in college. We rarely ever practiced with the defense. I was on offense. We'd come together for 2 periods and practice a day, and the rest of the time we were on a totally different field. I couldn't have told you what our defensive calls were, yet we were all on the same team trying to win the game. And as a church grows, it becomes more like that. Well, when people move from golfing buddies to basketball to football, a lot of times they feel like something is being taken away from them, even though the best thing for the group and the best thing for the health of the church is to reorganize. That doesn't mean that it is without pain. The pain of reorganization is real in any growing church. The second pain I want to talk about is the pain of abandonment. Man, I've never met a leader. I've never met a church that grew where the leader does not carry significant scars from people who he trusted and thought they were in his rear guard, and they ended up not being that way. They ended up being critical or cynical, or they just ended up being people who, as the vision of the church was getting bigger, as the vision was narrowing, they ended up just kind of having a season of really soul searching and deciding that the vision narrowing and locking in was maybe kind of something that they were not as happy about as they thought they were at the beginning. And so they end up moving on. One of the things I think people have to realize, church pastors have to realize, is of growing churches that are trying to grow and go, the pain of abandonment is real, and someone in the organization is always going to be unhappy, and I think that there's part of this where we need to understand as people leave and they're critical and even gossipy. The book of Proverbs is filled with this stuff. Proverbs 20, verse 19 tells us to avoid a gossip, but at the same time, you're not going to be able to control every narrative. There are going to be people who are upset and leave, and that's just going to be part of the call. It's going to be part of the price that we pay. Jeff Bezos said it like this, man, for Amazon to be what he had it in his mind that it would be, sometimes they were going to have to be willing to be misunderstood. And, we try to be clear, we try to say things, but when people misunderstand and they end up leaving, we're going to have to just kind of carry that, but it's going to be part of the deal. If we get leveled every time that happens, it's going to be very hard for us to continue to walk down the field here. And so we've got to see that one coming far off and realize we're not alone in it. There's great pain and abandonment. The third thing I would say is this. As we're growing, that growth comes, the price is chaos, disturbance, and pain. A third pain that we go through as leaders is the pain of a narrowing focus. I think that for me, as our church grew, I started realizing that I have got to stop being such a manager and a low-level to mid-level problem solver, even though that's sort of what I love to do. I've wondered in my life, if I wasn't in ministry, how good of a middle manager I could be, because I do like to solve problems, and I see things that are wrong, and I like managing things. And the reality is that was a big part of my job early on. But as the church starts to grow, I have to face some pain, and that pain is, am I willing to take things off the plate, even if I like them or even love them, because those are not the things that the organization needs from me now. I look at people in our organization and I realize some of them have taken things off the plate that they love dearly. Maybe a particular ministry like college ministry or something age-based. Maybe the oversight of somebody, of some other ministries that they really enjoy looking over. And they've had to decide as the church grows, what's the best thing here? Is the best thing for me just to keep in my lane all the things that I love? Or is the best thing for us, as an organization, for me to do what is most impactful? I've heard leadership described that way. Leadership is doing the thing that needs to be done. It's figuring out what it is that's going to move the needle, and it's doing that. Now, I'm not saying you don't stay in your passions and in your wheelhouse, but if you're like me in ministry, there's a lot of more things I love about ministry. There's a lot more passions that I have that I'm able to execute on. And so I've got to figure out what are those things that are the most important. There is pain in trying to narrow. There is pain in giving away things that you really love. I've told you guys before, for me, I think that in the lead pastor's chair, the biggest three things are preaching, casting vision, and building generosity in the hearts of your people. And to me, if I'm doing a lot of things that are outside of that, then, I'm not going to be as effective as I could be in the chair that I'm in. And so part of what I got to go through is the pain of narrowing focus. The fourth thing I would say is this. We want to talk about the pain of pride. In a growing organization and a going organization, I think that what many people do, they're so afraid of the pride that is going to potentially come in their heart over what God is doing through them, that they almost want to stay away and not grow and not go. And not have things kind of popping off and blowing and glowing within their ministry. They would rather stay away from that because they're afraid of their own pride. I feel that is a little bit like saying I'm going to take my ball and go home. I don't think that God has given us the option of not doing our best. We're called to do all things for His glory. Matthew 28, Acts 1. I think we're called to try and make a massive difference in this world through disciple making. And so, for me, the danger of there being pride is not a good enough reason to not go after it. Instead, I think it's a good reason to go after it with sobriety and open eyes and realize that every single one of us, when we have things going well, have the propensity to be, and probably will at some point be, King Nebuchadnezzar. If you guys remember in Daniel chapter 4, what happens? The king answered and says, "Is this not great Babylon, which I have built by my mighty power as a royal residence and for the glory of my majesty?" He says it like, hey, is this not the city that I have built? And what I would say is for us as Christian leaders, and again, this is not a mega thing. I mean, I've known guys that have gone and planted churches. They're growing to 100 or 200, and there's guys that are in revitalization efforts that are really tough, and they start with 10 or 20 people, and they start turning that thing around, and next thing you know, you're feeling pretty good about yourself because of the work that God is doing through you. And man, I think there's something about that that's good. Like, man, we're excited to be used, and I think there's joy in our giftings that matching up with the unique calling that God has on our life. So there is a joyful thing in seeing the Lord use you and use you in other people's lives. But at the same time, I don't know that any of us that have not experienced success in ministry, whether that be in big numerical growth or whether that be in something a little bit smaller, like I'm saying by percentage and a revitalization or something like that, I don't think there's any of us that haven't struggled in the same way that Nebuchadnezzar struggled. I don't think it's a good reason to take your ball and go home and not try to grow anymore. I think it sounds like it's a really good reason for me to try to repent and confess. And so, guys, when we grow churches, I just don't think there's anybody among us that hasn't at some point looked at it and sinfully said, look what I have built. And in that moment, the Holy Spirit of God will convict us that this is not our thing. It was never our thing. Jesus is the head here. It's not us. We cannot and should not be the best man at the wedding that's making eyes at the bride as she's coming down the aisle, trying to get her to look at us. Instead, we're trying to, connect her with her true groom. And that's what we're called to do. And so when we find ourselves in pride, not doing that, then what we need to do is think about James 5:16 and just say, hey, you know what? We need to confess our sin to the Lord for forgiveness, but we confess our sins to each other for healing. The fifth of 6 pain points in growing and going, the 6 pains. Number 5 is this, the pain of sending. Now, if we aren't growing, we may never get to this one, okay? And this is like what our whole podcast is about. That church growth is probably the most important thing that there is in terms of a catalyst for sending. We say it all the time like this: churches can grow without going, but they can't go without growing. We value sending capacity more than seating capacity, but for sending capacity, nothing is more important than seating capacity. So, we're assuming here that we're wanting to see a church that grows, reaches people from the outside, sees them baptized, sees them begin to grow as believers. Numbers are up and to the right. Well, when that begins to happen, we have the chance to really manifest our deepest level DNA when it comes to sending. And when that happens, it is never going to be easy. It is always going to create chaos. It's painful every single time. And that's part of the deal. Gospel goodbyes are painful. It's hard as a leader to pour into people for a long time and then to see them, in obedience to the call of God, begin to rise up, build a team, and take them away from your church. People that will tithe, people that will serve, elders, staff people, and to see them go and start a new thing. It's good for the kingdom. And I think about that even in our movement. I mean, I pray that one day we're going to have more people worshiping in the family of churches than we do the flock right here at Mercy Hill, and I believe that's going to happen. But it is painful to see them go. It's painful to see your friends leave. It's painful to see your leaders leave. You feel like you're being abandoned by them. You're not. They're going after God's call for their life, and so it's an exciting thing. It's a good thing, but don't think for a second that it's not a painful thing. And the final pain that I would mention today, and we could do 100 of these, but the final pain that I would mention today, just as I've been thinking about it, is the pain of kind of calling out and moving away from the guilt gene that many of us have in ministry. Let me explain guilt gene. I think a lot of guys, especially if you come from a blue collar background, and you watch your dad ever get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to work, if that ever happened in your life, then while you're pastoring, you carry that lineage and heritage with you, which in a lot of ways is great. I mean, man, you need that work ethic, and that's just an awesome thing to have. But it can borderline start tipping into a debilitating guilt, where because of that blue collar background, because of the guilt that we feel over, man, am I working enough? Am I being pretentious? It ends up being pastors that are always the one, hey, man, I got to be the first one there. I got to be the last one to leave. I got to set the tone. I have to kill myself for this church for it to thrive. If I'm healthy, that means the church is not. I got to kill myself in order that the church would be healthy. I got to proverbially figure out how to get up at 4 a.m. to pastor this church, even though it's a totally different deal and it's got a totally different emotional strain than a blue collar job. I've got to figure out how to put those hours in. And it's just a guilt gene, and a lot of guys have it. I certainly struggled with this for a long time. You feel guilty about there being something going on at the church that you're not a part of. You feel guilty around, not being the one that takes the toughest assignment, that kind of stuff. And at some point, there's a pain that we must go through to sort of divorce ourselves and get over some of that guilt gene. Because at the end of the day, you have to choose as a leader, am I going to do what makes this guilt gene feel better, or am I going to do the things that make our organization better? being the first one there and the last one to leave, being praised for doing things behind the scenes that nobody knows you're doing, and answering emails at 11 o'clock at night because you're the one that's still driven and up and doing it. The reality is that stuff adds up to big chunks of time and energy that take us away from the things that the organization and the people in the organization really need from you. If you're the lead pastor, what they need from you is to be healthy, to be sharp, to preach really good sermons, to communicate who you are and where you're going well, and to help people have a generous heart. And those are focusing on those things mean we stop becoming the first one there and the last to leave. It means that we're not the one that tries to take the toughest assignment all the time. And, that can be painful for many of us because it strikes at the core of our identity. Am I pulling my weight? Am I doing enough? And, that's a painful thing to walk through. But if the organization is going to succeed, it's going to have to be a pain that we take on. Those are 6 quick pain points that I think every church and organization and leader is going to go through as they begin to grow and continue to grow. And the last thing I would say before I close the podcast is this. Y'all, these are pain points that are coming. The question is, are we going to be willing to pay the price? I don't know that pastoring churches is harder than any other leadership role in the world. It's definitely different than other leadership roles in the world. But we have got to ask the question, are we going to be willing to pay the price of some of this pain to see our leadership capacity grow and to see the capacity of growing and going in our churches to continue to get larger and larger? One of the things I say all the time is, man, we entered a spiritual war as pastors. What did we think was going to happen? We chose a profession that might as well be spiritually speaking, going down in the coal mines every single day. In a lot of ways, there's hazards that come with that. But the price, we believe, is worth it because we believe that anything and all these pains, even when they're added up together, and we will carry them, they are light and momentary afflictions compared to what is coming. 2 Corinthians 4:17 tells us. And I pray today can be a refocus. Some of us listening to this today might be thinking to yourself, man, we are absolutely in the middle of the pain of reorganization right now. And there's a conversation that I need to have that I just don't want to have. And I know that it's going to hurt the church's growth. Well, then you know what I'm praying you do? I'm praying you think about Matthew 14, go read it, and count the cost. Man, God has called us to get after it for his kingdom. And in order to do that, we need to count the cost of what it means to be in a pastoral role of a growing and going church. And maybe we'll see that what God wants on the other side of that is a big enough thing, it's a glorious enough thing for us to go and have that conversation that we've been sort of avoiding. Or maybe it's something else. Maybe it's the pain of abandonment, man. There's a sting of betrayal. Or there's someone that's, behind, there's someone that maybe a staff person or something like that has decided they're going to leave and you're not aligned. I don't know what it would be in your life. See that it's coming. Realize that you're not alone. Realize it's not the last time that it's going to happen, but count the cost. Man, it's the price that we pay in order to play. And God has given us one of the greatest, as pastors, one of the greatest jobs in the world. He has given us one of the absolute greatest callings in the world to help build his kingdom. And sometimes we're just going to have to pay the price. Maybe there's something you love to do, paint a focus. Hey, you need to drop it, take it off the table. It's not helping the organization move forward. Maybe you're feeling the pain of pride right now. Not a great enough reason to take your ball and go home. Instead, I pray that you'll confess it to somebody. Maybe there's a young guy in your church that you don't want to lose for anything in the world. Hey, there's going to be pain in sending him out, and yet it's right, and we believe that God will restore and restock the things that we have given away. And maybe right now you're dealing with a pretty serious guilt gene, and there's going to be pain the first time someone insinuates that you're not carrying your weight because you weren't at whatever that thing was. That guilt gene is going to come roaring back. And I would just call you today, no. Man, take the pain of that criticism and get the pain that comes from divorcing yourselves and getting over that guilt gene so that you can be the best leader and version of yourself that you can be in the role that God has called you to be in. So let's count the cost. And let's face whatever pain is in front of us for growth, man, and let's walk through those things to the glory of God. Hey, guys, I hope this is helpful. Man, if it is, go in our Facebook group, our private Facebook group, drop some notes in there about things that you're walking through or any ways that people can help. And, man, we'll catch you next time.